I'm here with Stephen Espinoza. My first question to you, Steve, what's going on with the Pitbull Cruz? Have you guys offered him the Edwin De Los Santos, Michael Rivera, or Frank Martin fights?
Look, we're working on something, or on a couple things for Isak, and we're not quite locked in on one opportunity for him yet. But that's one of the guys. Frank Martin isn't on the schedule yet. Isak isn't. Obviously, some big names: Charlo, Spence, Thurman, not on it. I think in the next couple of weeks we'll be adding those. Either could be on a pay-per-view undercard, could be on a Showtime show.
Yeah, Edwin De Los Santos has been calling out Pitbull Cruz heavy on social media. So I guess you explain what the latest.
Yeah, that is. I mean, look, that would be an interesting fight. Look, it's not super easy to get Isak Cruz fights. So I give credit to De Los Santos for being willing to do it, because look, I think what Cruz proved against Tank, is he's. That wasn't just a bad night on Tank's behalf. That was he gave him one of the toughest fights Tank has had.
When Terence Crawford and David fought David, how come him and Errol Spence didn't continue negotiating their fight? Kind of like Gervonta and Ryan. Gervonta had to stay busy with Hector. Now he's fighting Ryan.
Well, they have. It's sort of the same thing. There was on Ryan and Tank, there was a deal struck, and then obviously they were both going to take interim fights, or at least, ended up that only Tank did. Crawford did the Amadisian fight. Spence was going to go to his fight. His fell apart. As soon as Spence's fell apart, there started to be some additional discussions. So they've been consistent, their discussions pretty much throughout. They're just coming to light now, which I think is a better thing. I think it's quietly. The first negotiation is better public. Maybe keeping it quiet the second time around gives it a better chance of success. But no one's given up yet. Everybody's still working on it.
Did any of Errol Spence's opponents have zero guarantees, and if so, who?
Look, I'm not going to out anybody, in terms of what their deals are. But the reality is, if there was, there's plenty of other fights that we have done where fighters did not get guarantees. There have been Mayweather fights that have been guarantees. There have been, other pay-per-view guys that did get guarantees. It's not that unusual. See, the reality is, Floyd on a lot of these, not a lot, some of them, he opted not to take guarantees, because the reality is, if we're paying a guarantee, we're going to get a bigger piece of the pie. So if you believe in your event's going to perform like a Spence Crawford would perform, you don't want to ask for a guarantee, because that's going to say, to me, I'm going to say, okay, if I'm paying out some money, I'm going to get a bigger piece of the pie. So at the end of the day, I don't think it's all that unusual to make a deal without a guarantee. It's just a different choice on how much risk someone wants to take.
Right. Okay, fights at this magnitude, they usually have a guaranteed purse. Canelo versus Caleb, Floyd versus Pacquiao, Wilder versus Fury.
Floyd versus Pacquiao didn't have a guaranteed purse.
Okay.
Yep.
So why, I guess you explain why Errol and Crawford's fight was a little different.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's part of it, there's also uncertainty. I mean, look, there's, from some aspect of it, it's difficult to know what that fight makes. It does very well, but is that 400? Is it 600? Is it 800,000 buys? Who knows? So the reality is, look, if there's, there could be an opportunity for a guarantee. It would be a very different deal with a guarantee.
Are both Tank and Ryan Garcia fighting with a zero guarantee? I mean,
I don't actually know what Golden Boy's deal with Tank is. Excuse me, Golden Boy's deal with Ryan is. And as for Tank, look, I'm not going to out his business. It's not really appropriate for me to do it.
Okay, let's switch gears a little bit. Jared and his father said that BLK Prime contacted them to make a Crawford fight. What's your thoughts on that?
I mean, there was a conversation. I mean, they contacted me as well. But the reality is, they didn't have Crawford under contract. So the reality, what do they bring to the table? That would be like you calling me saying you wanted to make a Crawford fight. It's like, okay, what do I need you for? I can talk to Crawford directly. So the reality is, we're a team. We've supported Boots and Bosey from the very start. You know, they want to fight Spence, they want to fight Thurman, they want to fight Crawford. They'll fight anybody. You know, it isn't. You know, it's sort of difficult getting over the hump to get to that title shot. He's going to get it. You know, we're doing everything we can to help deliver it. It just, didn't make a lot of sense to involve, BLK Prime when, they didn't really have anything that they brought to the table.
So, with that said, if Crawford and Errol Spence fight can't happen, is it possible we still can see a Jared Ennis versus Crawford on Black Prime, kind of like Fulton versus Inouye on ESPN?
I mean, again, there'd have to be a reason to involve Black Prime. If Crawford, comes to us and we'll make a deal directly, for Charlo, for Ennis, for anybody, there's no reason to involve anybody else. If he comes to us and says, look, I want to, I'm partnered with BLK Prime, then great. Then at that point, then if we want to do business with him, we'll do that. But again, we're just not throwing people into the deal just because they happen to, call us with an idea.
Well, the IBF recently said that they're going to order Errol Spence versus Jared Ennis fight within 120 days after Errol Spence's next fight. Do you think Spence is thinking about fighting Ennis or moving up to 154?
I think Spence wants the biggest fight possible. So it really depends, what it is. I know, Errol Spence isn't worried about fighting anybody. Just like Boots isn't afraid of fighting anybody. Those guys are real fighters. They're not avoiding anybody. They're not scared of anybody. So at the end of it, I think, it's part of this is a business. What's the biggest fight? What's the biggest fight that can be made immediately at 154? Is there a bigger fight to be made at 147? I think if I were in Spence's shoes, that's what I would be discussing. That's the way I would make the decision.
Yeah. So has Spence talked to you guys at all how serious he's planning on moving up to 154, or have you talked to you?
I don't think it's an absolute requirement. It's not like he can't physically do it at all anymore. Sure, my understanding it's a little easier. It has been a little bit easier in the past. It gets harder as you get older to make that weight. So there may come a time where it's not really a choice. But at this point, I think he still has a choice. He can make 147. It's some work. But obviously for the big fights, if there's still big fights at 47, then he'll stay there.
All right, why is Stanionis fighting Virgil Ortiz instead of Jared Ennis?
Well, there were lots of discussions. We went down the road there, but in the middle of it, there is a petition, made that to require Stanionis versus Ortiz, and so that was really, in order for those fighters to move forward, and not lose their positions, they had to do that fight. So that was actually in the middle of the discussions we were starting to have, toward maybe a Stanionis Ennis fight.
Yeah, sorry about that. When it comes to the next best, biggest generational fight, the fight is Jared Ennis and Virgil Ortiz. Point blank. Is that a fight you guys want to make if there is no Crawford or Spence?
Sure. I mean, I think it's a really interesting fight, but I think Ortiz got to make sure that he beats Stanionis first. So I don't think that's a foregone conclusion. I think that's a tough fight. So if he gets past that, sure. Again, add that guy to the list. Add the winner of Stanionis Ortiz, and somebody Ennis would not hesitate to fight.
Stanionis is fighting Virgil Ortiz next, so the Jared Ennis fight is makeable. Are you guys willing to make it?
Sure, absolutely.
With the zone.
If a deal can be made, sure. I mean, we did it on this fight. It all depends what the requirements are. The requirements that they had for making this fight, the Davis-Garcia fight, were different than what had happened in the past. So the reality, they presented an arrangement that was makeable. If they were flexible in making other fights in the future, then we can reach some sort of agreement.
Guys, you got to roll.
Okay. Thank you, sir.